In this video, we're going to create an S3 bucket and then configure that S3 bucket for SNS notifications on AWS. So the first thing we want to do is create an S3 bucket. After you've logged into the management console, you're going to go to S3. Now you could get to S3 by simply typing it in to the search bar. That would give you S3. We didn't do that because we had recently visited S3. It was already available to us in the default screen shown when you log into AWS. If you see that your side left menu is collapsed, indicated here by the hamburger stack, you simply come over to it and click on it. That will expand it, and we want to select the buckets options. So as you can see, we don't have any buckets, so we're going to create a bucket. We're going to call that bucket Quick Starts Bucket 1. Okay. For the purposes of this exercise, we're going to keep everything else at the default settings, and we're going to create the bucket. Scroll down, hit the Create Bucket button, and just like that, you'll get a message here indicating that your bucket was created successfully, and here the bucket is. Okay, so the next step is we're going to create the SNS topic itself. Okay, simple notifications. It's AWS's tool that's used to send out set up topics that can be used for, in this case, email notifications. So we're back. I have another tab that's open here. It shows the AWS Management Console. Again, since I recently visited, it's showing here. But if you're doing this for the first time, simply type in SNS. First option is Simple Notification Service. Click on that, and you get taken to the splash screen. Again, you'll have the condensed menu. Simply click it once. We can launch the dashboard. We won't see any topics here or subscriptions because we have not created any. All right, so we're going to go to topics, and we're going to click on Create Topic. Here or here, doesn't matter. They both have the same end result. So the details section of Create Topic, we're going to select Standard, and we're going to give our topic a name. And for simplicity, I'm going to call it Quick Starts Topic. And let's make it SNS Topic. Okay, we want that name that's created, that's designed for AWS's uses. And we have an optional display name that could be different, right? This is what will be shown to us throughout the life of this topic in the ecosystem. Let's keep those identical for the purposes of this exercise. And we're going to hit the Create Topic button. Okay. All right, so just like that, already we've created an S3 bucket and we've created a topic. I'm going to go back to the dashboard for SNS, and now you'll see that there is a topic. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do now, this is an important step. It trips a lot of people up. AWS is a very secured infrastructure, a very secured platform. So what you'll find is that when you create a topic or many other services, a lot of things are locked down, meaning that they're configured by default in such a way that your traffic can be outbound or denied for all inbound. And then you configure as you go to decide what traffic you'd like to accept, or in this case, which activities you'd like to accept. So we're going to go back into this topic, and I'm going to show you something. If we look at the access policy, This is a policy. It's in JSON format. This is the access policy. And this basically controls the rules for the topic itself. All right. It can't be edited from here. We need to edit it, right? So we're going to go back to the edit button here. And what we didn't do before that we are going to do now is this is the same screen that was shown when we created this topic. However, this time we're going to go into the access policy, which it shows is optional. It's kind of it's 6 or half a dozen. For user experience, I would not make this optional. I would force users to visit this. That is my recommendation and my preference. But I'm not Amazon, and this is what they've decided to do. And the reason for this is if you do not configure your access policy to allow interaction with the S3 bucket, in this case, you would run into an error when you actually go to configure the S3 bucket for notifications. Here's the thing with the access policy. What we're going to do is basically this is all default content that is created when you create the simple notification service topic. We're not going to get into a lot of detail on this. You'll see that in other videos. What we are going to talk about though is this section here. Okay, so essentially at a high level, what this does is this topic calls out a resource, right? Anything in an access policy does just that. It determines the rules of access. Okay. And you may be saying to yourself, well, if it's an AWS service, why would I need an access policy to use another AWS service, in this case, an S3 bucket? And that would be a great question. But as I explained earlier, security is a cornerstone of Amazon's web services. And everything typically is locked down by default. Okay. And that includes service AWS internal services communicating with one another. So what you see here is the AWS service basically, the SNS topic basically has its own ARN number, and that's pre-populated for us. So we don't really have to do anything with that. Where we do need to pay attention is in the condition. Okay, so right now, again, we'll keep this high level. Basically, there's a condition here that says the person or the entity that is going to use this topic must be this particular account number, right? And that account number coincides with this account number, which you can find in the upper right-hand corner underneath your profile, okay? So that's on point. What's not listed here is a condition. Okay, and what's not listed here is actually the S3 bucket itself. Nowhere in this policy does it mention that this particular S3 bucket should have access to this. It really actually only says that I, the account owner, can have access to this topic, but it doesn't mention anything about the S3 bucket, which is another AWS service. So what I've done here is we want to make sure that there's a comma here, and then I'm going to paste in a condition. Okay, and as you can see, the condition is basically ARN like, followed by AWS source ARN, and this is where you actually want to plug in the actual ARN for the bucket itself. So now we're going to go back to our S3 tab, the tab that has the S3 management console up, and we're going to come down to the bucket that we created earlier and click on that bucket, and then we're going to select properties, and the ARN, which stands for Amazon Resource Name, as you can see here, is populated right here in the bucket overview section. So you simply tap the copied icon Then go back to the simple notification service tab. And guess what? We're going to paste the name of that bucket here. And that is literally it. We're going to hit the Save Changes button. And just like that, we're returned back to the details screen. If we want to look at our handiwork, we can click on the access policy and you'll see our changes reflected here. Okay, with that done, our access policy for our notifications are set up now. Okay, so what do we need to do next? I'll tell you what we need to do next. So what we want to do now is, we're not done yet. The last step we need to take with regard to the simple notification service is to click on the subscriptions tab, and we're going to create an actual subscription. And this is where we'll determine that we want our subscription type to be of email. Okay, you press the subscription, create subscription button. Yeah, ARN is pre-populated, so we don't need to touch that. Where it gets interesting is the protocol. There's several options here. We want to select the email option, okay? And here is where we're going to actually type out the email address that we want to use to receive our notifications. Okay, and as you can see here, after your subscription is created, you must confirm it. That essentially means you're going to receive an email to this email address after we hit this create subscription button. And in that email, you will be asked to confirm. Okay, so basically just like that, you have a success message here. Now, if I were to go back to the subscriptions option in the left menu, it shows us we have a subscription and it is pending. Now, using the miracle of time, I have gone to the email account. As you can see, here's the email. It basically tells you where it came from. It has the ARN name, a number as the subject, as the from address, that is. And you basically want to look for the confirm subscription button and hit that button, and then you'll get a message that looks similar to this. And that's pretty much it. We can get out of email now. We're done. When we return to the SNS tab, it still shows pending confirmation, but what we can do is hit the refresh button, and just like that, you can now see that this email address is now been officially confirmed. This subscription has been confirmed. Now, if we go back to the dashboard, we'll see we have one subscription and one topic, or one topic with one subscription. Okay, now that that's all done, what we want to do next is go back to the bucket that we created earlier. I'm using separate tabs. I would recommend you do the same thing. And we're going to create, and if we're taking this from the top, you can simply start with the buckets option being clicked on your left menu. And again, the one bucket that you created earlier, click on the bucket itself, and it'll default to the objects tab. We're going to go ahead and upload something. You don't have to. In fact, we are not going to. All right, for fun, we'll just go straight to the properties tab, and then we'll use the notifications. We'll test those notifications by creating a notification that sends out a notification once an object is uploaded. You can use whatever, you can use notifications for whatever you like, but for the sake of making this succinct and concise, we're going to kill two birds with one stone. So I'm going to click the create notification button, and I'm going to call this simply, I'm going to call this quick starts S3 upload SNS. Now, I'm a big fan of naming things that make as much sense as possible to me if I were to see them somewhere else outside of this particular screen. So we're going to leave everything else as default. Now, when you get down to event types, I'm going to make this simple. I want anything that is put. Put is the same as uploaded. Anytime anything is added to the S3 bucket, I want to be notified of it. So I'm simply going to select the put option, and then I'm going to scroll down past everything else, except for until I get to the destination section, in which case we're going to select SNS topic. And we're going to choose from your SNS topics. We're going to leave that option selected because we've already created an SNS topic. Here it is. It's the only one here. If we had created more topics, there'd be more showing. But this is really simple and easy. We'll select that and we'll hit the Save Changes button. Now, we have an error message here. And this is a common issue. It says, unable to validate the following destination confirmations. What they're basically talking about is when they say the following, you think to yourself, well, there isn't anything following this. But essentially, they're talking about this information up here. Now, the bottom line on this is more times than that, this has something to do with the actual policies set up in this particular topic. So if you take a look at this, our principal is AWS, all caps. However, when you get down here to the condition that I inserted earlier, it's AWS lowercase. So let's try that, right? And we're troubleshooting these things for a reason in real time, because that in the real world, these are the kinds of challenges you run into every day, which you won't see in most tutorials. Most tutorials will just tell you everything is hunky-dory and it'll work just like this, and that never works. What happens in a lab only happens in a lab. Anyone who's done any kind of development work knows that. So we're going to go back to the S3 bucket tab, and I'm not even going to hit the refresh button. I'm just going to try to save the changes again. Okay, so that wasn't it. So let's go back to the topic, SNS topic. We're going to hit the edit button. Let's go back. I want to take a look at something else. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, that all looks correct. And we're going to go to that access policy, and we're going to see what else could be the matter. So changing the caps didn't work. So I'm going to try this. I'm going to try to change the principal to service. And I'm going to say s3.amazonawsservice.com, and I'm going to save those changes. And as to where I got that from, I looked at previous work that I've done that was successful, previous access policies that I created that have been successful. So we're going to hit Save Changes again, and that turns out that wasn't it either. Okay, so since that failed to work, why don't we try? I'm going to go back into the access policy, and there's one other thing that may work. I went back again, and I'm referencing previous access policies that were created for the simple notification service that were successful. Okay, and one of the things that I noticed is in the string equals section, by default, AWS populates source owner with the account ID. What I've noticed is in a separate policy that I've created that is functional, we're using source account instead. So let's try that and see if that solves our problem. So we're going to save the changes on the topic. We're going to go back to the tab that's running the where we're setting up event notification for the S3 bucket. And again, I'm not going to change anything here, right? Because the problem is that QuickStart's SNS topic itself is throwing errors whenever we try to create it. It's actually never been successfully created. Whenever you see an error message after you hit the same Save Changes button, it hasn't created it. It's attempted to create it. So, and that has nothing to do with the fact that the term is populated here. It's populated here because it does in fact exist here. That just because it's populated doesn't mean that it's actually working. So what we're going to do next is since we've made the changes in the simple notification services topic, we're going to now hit save changes and see if that solves our problem. And we hit pay dirt. We have a green background in our completion message letting us know that the notification was successfully updated. I'm going to scroll back down to the events notification section in the S3 bucket, and you'll see that our event is here. It's going to trigger on put event type of put, meaning that anytime something is uploaded into that S3 bucket, we should in fact receive a notification. So that's actually what we're going to do next. We're going to go back to the objects tab of the S3 bucket, and we're going to upload an object. Okay, so we click the upload button, and it takes us to another screen. We default to the files and folders section that's expanded. We're going to add a file, and what we're going to do is quite simply let's see if drag and dropping will work. So what I'm going to do is simply slide this over just a little bit to expose some images I have on the desktop. We're going to slide those in. As you can see, the screen changes to drag the files and folders you want to this area. We'll drop those files in, and just like that, we have the file showing here. We're only going to do one file. Happens to be a Quick Starts logo. I'm just going to skip everything else, or leave everything else as default. Not skip, but leave it as default. We're going to hit the upload button. Okay, now technically we've just put a file into the S3 bucket. We're going to close. We have our success message here. We're going to close out this window. That will take us back to the actual S3 bucket window. Here's our bucket name. Quick Starts Bucket 1, and as you can see, the file we uploaded is now here. Now the question is, do we have an actual email sent via the notifications, SNS topic notification? Do we have an actual email to the email address we set up indicating that this has happened? Well, and thanks to the modern miracle of recording, I basically jumped right to the tab, the email, webmail inbox, and as you can see, we have an Amazon S3 notification. Its name is Quick Starts SNS topic. That is the name that we gave to our topic. We can go back here and see it, and that is showing as the from in the from section of the email. And then you have basically some JSON. Basically, this JSON is an indication of, it's beyond the scope of this video. But essentially what this JSON is telling us is that you can quickly scan through here and see the name of our image that we uploaded. So you know that this is the, you can see S3 here. So at a high level, this is your notification, right? This is a notification to let you know that an object has been put into the S3 bucket. And that is essentially going to conclude the video. You've successfully set up an S3 bucket. You successfully set up a simple notification service. You successfully then configured that sort of a simple notification service policy, access policy, to communicate with the S3 bucket. And then finally, we set up a S3 bucket event notification that leveraged the simple notification service, so that whenever an object is put into the S3 bucket, an email would be sent. And that's it.